My name is Avery Lang, 31 years old. The store's air was too cold for late afternoon. Flowers on the end caps shivered under fluorescent hum as if they also wanted to leave. I stood between the travel-sized detergent and tampons, reading labels I didn't need to read, while three voices braided together by the pharmacy counter. I knew the laugh first, high, precise, practiced to ring like a bell. Kendall Price from my husband's office, the kind of woman who arranged her vowels like jewelry. Poor Gavin, she said, that quiet little wife, she's wallpaper at company parties. They didn't see me behind the cardboard tower of discount shampoo, they never did. The second voice, Tanya from accounting, whose nails were always a fresh, immaculate red, leaned in hard enough I could hear the lip gloss smile. What does she even do? I heard she works from home. She added a theatrical whisper. Laundry consultant. The third voice laughed until it hiccuped. He could do so much better, Kendall said, pleased with herself. He's about to be a star at the firm. She's a non-entity. My phone buzzed against my palm. The subject line waiting for me was a clean, triangular thing that made my pulse slow with relief. Lattice Sentinel. Executed. Contract transfer. Mercer and Dane Corp. 7 figures. Signed. Countersigned. Wire in escrow. The company Kendall and Tanya spent their lunches gossiping about had just hired my company to investigate themselves. They'd never connected the logo on their purchase order with the woman who brought Tupperware salads to holiday parties. I let the word nonentity sit on my tongue and dissolve. It tasted like old pennies. Tanya's voice drifted again. She dropped out of college, right? Or never finished. True enough, if you cut the sentence off at the wrong place. I left MIT at 22 when my first build sold for a number I couldn't explain over dinner without changing the weather in the room. After that, I learned to prefer the back row. Let loud men win credit at the microphone. Let loud women decide who counted. Build the real thing in the shadows and make the shadows mine. Gavin knew pieces. He knew I had tech skills, the way people say a yogurt is healthy. He never asked how I paid for our mortgage early or why my laptop had its own fire safe. He liked to introduce me with a smile he thought was loving. My better half. The men shook my hand like a cloth napkin. The women glanced at my shoes, then above my head, where I did not exist. I give it 2 years, Kendall said. He'll trade up. 2 years was generous. They were bad at math when it wasn't their budget. I opened the draft I had been writing for months. An email with a neat row of exhibits attached. Screenshots, ledger deltas, transaction IDs, and a subfolder charmingly labeled Reconciliations, where Kendall had pushed personal charges through a dead vendor number with the kind of audacity that grows in fluorescent light. It would land in internal audit first thing Monday, a pebble I flicked uphill that would return as an avalanche. A woman in a blue smock started a price check over the loudspeaker. My receipt printer stuttered. Time reattached to itself. I stepped out from behind the display. Kendall's face stopped doing human things for a heartbeat. Her smile arrived late and with a squeak. Avery, hi, how long have you... Just now, I said. Housewife errands. I placed tampons on the counter like a prop in a scene I had rewritten 100 different ways. Tanya recovered faster. We should do coffee, she offered, head cocked, nails gleaming. Women supporting women. That sounds nice, I said, and meant none of it. Next week's tight. There's a big systems review happening. Lot of changes. Kendall's credit card paused halfway into her wallet. She was thinking of what she'd charged this month and whether changes meant someone had noticed. By the time the automatic doors sighed me into dusk, my phone buzzed again. Naomi Blake, my COO, never wasted characters. Contract live. Audit window opens. 0800 quad, Monday. Will stage read-only taps tonight. Also, your friend Kendall's slush trail is cleaner than before, but not clean enough. Want me to package? Package meant a discreet, documented, first-pass summary. It meant if someone pretended not to understand, we would help them understand. Yes, I typed. Then, good work. I drove home with the windows cracked, cool air flattening the day's noise. Our block was the kind realtors described as leafy, a word that wanted to be quaint, as if trees could guarantee good marriages and tidy ledgers. Lights were on at the Mercers, our front windows making warm squares on the lawn. Inside, I hung keys, washed my hands, and started water for pasta. Garlic hit the pan and surrendered its secrets. Gavin came in buoyant, bone-deep pleased, a man whose future had been whispering sweet promises all afternoon. His tie was loose. He poured whiskey he didn't need, amber tilting into cut glass. "Wild news," he said. "Accounting flagged some discrepancies. Kendall's suspended." I lifted basil leaves, tore them slow. "That's awful," I said softly, as if fate were an accident that could be apologized to. "The timing's interesting." He kissed the top of my head. "It is, isn't it? Laws of the universe finally loving me back." He sipped, winced, sipped again. With her out, the promotion's basically mine. Behind his reflection in the microwave door, I looked at him the way doctors look at x-rays. The crack was already there. The light just hadn't found it yet. My phone lit the counter, a new sender. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Cyber Division, subject, follow-up, shush, appointment confirmation. Formal, crisp, a paragraph about arrival time, another about identification, a third about how interviews work when the person you love has made a long habit of thinking consequences are for other people. He raised his glass, to things finally breaking my way. I turned the burner low, wiped my hands, and faced him. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice almost affectionate, like a scarf that could also be a rope. "Someone from the federal building called. They want to talk to you tomorrow morning." His fingers loosened. The glass slid. The sound it made upon the tile wasn't loud so much as exact, a bell tolling for only one person. Whiskey spread like a map of a country that no longer exists. "The FBI?" He tried for a laugh and got static. "Why? That's absurd." I stepped around the amber, the glittering, the small, sharp pieces of the life he thought he held. I reached for paper towels, the way people do when they decide on mercy without changing the outcome. "They didn't say. I'm sure it's routine," I said, and handed him the roll and watched the part of him that had always believed in easy explanations begin to drown. He was still blotting when my phone buzzed again. Naomi. Also found a backdoor pivoted off an orphaned service account. Quiet since last month. Different signature than Kendall's slush. Might be your husband. I typed only, "document," air-gapped. You know the drill. Gavin stood holding a palmful of glass like confession. Maybe I should call a lawyer. "If you think that's necessary." I smiled with my eyes and not my mouth. "It might look proactive." He searched my face the way a child searches the dark for familiar furniture. For 3 years, I'd been the room he knew. Soft lights, a steady chair, the place he set his feet. He didn't realize I'd been rearranging things while he slept. The pasta water breathed. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked once and changed its mind. After he left the kitchen to make phone calls full of bravado and thin oxygen, I plated pasta for one and ate standing up, the way I used to when nights were code and coffee and the exquisite privacy of building something no one expected of me. I sent Naomi a last message before bed. At 08:03, we stopped being invisible. The reply came instantly because she knows my velocity. Copy. Doors open at 07:50. In the mirror, I brushed my hair like a woman rehearsing normal. On the nightstand, the appointment confirmation glowed from my lock screen. In the other room, Gavin's voice rose and fell, performing innocence to a man whose job it was to price the distance between a performance and a plea. I turned off the light and let the house quiet itself around me. Tomorrow the fluorescent hum would be different. Not louder, just truer, like the sound a thing makes when it's finally named. I woke before dawn to the sound of the ice maker coughing in the dark, followed by the thud of the freezer door. In our kitchen, appliances had their own nervous systems. They clattered the way people do when they're trying not to wake the house. I lay still and listened to quiet become information. Gavin's careful steps across tile, the slow pour of water into a glass he wouldn't drink. He had never been good at sleeping when he wasn't sure he was winning. He came back to bed without turning on the lamp. The mattress dipped. The smell of soap and last night's whiskey threaded the air. He didn't reach for me. Instead, he exhaled through his nose as if keeping a promise to himself not to panic. When his breath finally evened out, I watched the red numbers on the clock paw at the minutes until the world began to gray. At 6, I went down to start coffee. The kitchen contained our life in still lifes. A fruit bowl, a stack of mail I'd already scanned and sorted, a line of basil plants in repurposed candle jars. The whiskey stain had dried into a topographical suggestion. A single shard glinted under the toe kick like it had survived a war. Naomi's overnight package sat precisely where I'd asked the courier to leave it. No logo, just brown paper, a slot for a tamper strip. I slid a nail under the edge and freed the drive case, matte metal with a faint scratch that looked like a comet. Inside, our air-gapped copy of the logs from Mercer and Dane's identity management system, plus a mapped timeline of authentications. The orphaned service account had been created 6 months ago. The first use happened 2 days after a weekend in Palm Springs, when Gavin told me he'd lost his badge and needed a temporary profile just for Monday. The signatures were shy at first. Few packets, low noise, but confidence is a muscle. Whoever owned it started lifting heavier. Gavin shuffled in, hair rumpled, mouth set in the practiced smile he wore for disappointing clients. "Morning," he said too brightly, as if the day might be charmed by politeness. "Coffee?" I asked. "Please." His hands were steady when he took the mug, but he drank without tasting. "I thought about it all night," he said. "This is going to be fine. These things happen. It's probably some routine sweep related to Kendall. They'll want to talk to everyone." "I'm sure that's it," I said, as if certainty were a service I provided. He took a breath that tried to be a laugh. "I mean, what would they even ask me? I'm in business development. I negotiate. I don't touch systems." He trailed off as if the sentence had discovered a trap it didn't recognize. For a moment, he looked at the dried whiskey like it could offer a different version of the story. "I should go in early, clear my head at the office." "Your interview's at 9, I reminded him. "Leaving early would just make you sit longer." He nodded, then hovered by the pantry door, thinking, or pretending to think. It was the same face he made during board games, calculating the angle where he could look clever without appearing mean. "Avery," he said, almost gently, "if anyone calls, will you tell them we're out? I don't need distractions." "Of course." I wiped the counter in small circles until it shone. He watched my hand like it might reveal a code he didn't have access to. He showered. I packed a bag with things he'd forget, charging cable, mints, a legal pad. While the water ran, I opened the office door he kept half closed like a teenager and took inventory with my eyes. The laptop tray was empty. The desk drawer where he'd once hidden a burner phone held only pens and petty cash. On the floor, a trash bag sat cinched, but not tied, the way people leave a sentence when they intend to finish it later. I placed a latex glove over my hand and lifted the bag onto the desk. Inside, a cracked mouse, 2 shredded envelopes, and the corpse of a USB drive with its metal head twisted as if by pliers. I held it to the light. Black gouges marked the casing. A pocket attempt at erasing, like scrubbing blood from tile with hot water and hope. I photographed each angle and sealed the pieces in a Ziploc, added them to the brown paper folder with this morning's timestamp. I didn't believe in trophies, but I did believe in narratives. People think evidence is a constellation of shocking dots. Mostly it's a series of careful, boring dashes, each one a small refusal to forget. By 8:30, he was dressed in a navy suit that used to declare inevitability. Today it fit like someone else's story. He caught sight of us in the hallway mirror. 2 people who had made promises under a white arch on a June lawn. 2 people who had believed all the usual things about teamwork and trajectory. His face flickered, the way a TV does when the cable slips. "You don't have to come," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I want to be there," I said, and watched relief stumble into suspicion before he could smooth it. In the car, he rehearsed answers to questions he imagined a federal agent might ask. "I always complied with network policies," he said to the windshield. "If there was unauthorized access I wasn't aware, I would never endanger client data. My record speaks for itself. He stopped, drew a breath, and tried again. "I'm a team player." "Team players don't have to say they are," I said softly, and he flinched, as if the sentence had thrown something. Traffic was kind. The sky had the color of a pressed shirt. He fiddled with the radio, found a morning show, laughing about a celebrity's divorce. He twisted the volume down when the host said irreconcilable differences, as if language might be contagious. The federal building looked like authority had ordered itself in concrete. We parked in visitor and walked through security. His belt set the detector off. He joked about metal fillings and flashed the smile that had opened doors for him since prep school. The guard did not care about prep school. We took seats in a waiting area where the chairs were designed to make you reconsider your life. Gavin checked his watch, then his phone, then the clock on the far wall, as if one of them might be lying kinder. He looked at me with the eyes of a man who wants a lifeguard and isn't ready for the swim test. "You're with me," he said. It was not a question. "I'm always with you," I said, which was true and not the comfort he wanted. Agent Morales appeared at 9:02 with a file under one arm and the air of someone who keeps time honest. She shook both our hands. "Mr. Mercer, thank you for coming. Ms. Lang, there's a cafe downstairs if you'd like to wait somewhere more comfortable." "I'll be fine here," I said. "Actually," she said, almost conversationally, "would you mind grabbing coffee with me for a few minutes? There's a couple of process notes I wanted to discuss." Gavin stiffened. "Do you need my wife for this?" The word wife came out shaped like property. Agent Morales didn't blink. "Just housekeeping." To him, "We'll bring you back in a moment." We rode the elevator down without speaking. In the cafe, federal employees moved with practiced purpose, holding paper cups like dispatches. Morales bypassed the drip line and ordered water. "Full disclosure," she said once we'd found a table, "your documentation was meticulous. The chain of custody on those logs, clean. If this goes to trial, it will hold." A group of analysts laughed 3 tables over. Somewhere, a microwave argued with a burrito. "You're sure he's the one on the orphaned account?" I asked, not because I doubted the math, but because I wanted to hear the sound of certainty at 9:15 on a weekday. "Not 99%, she said. 100. She slid a printout across the table. Timestamps, IP hops, a pattern that looked like knitting if you love knitting the way I love patterns. The first sign-in the Monday after Palm Springs, a crescendo that matched his travel and late nights, the pivot into a client sandbox 3 weeks later. Her finger touched the spike at exactly 1 a.m. on the Thursday he'd worked late and texted me a selfie from the empty boardroom, tie loosened, eyes alight with the pleasure of getting away with something. I didn't touch the paper. His lawyer? In with him now. He'll do what lawyers do. And if he lies? Her mouth curved, not unkindly. Then he'll be telling a story to a room trained to hear stories fall apart. I stood. I should send a message to my team. Prep the readouts for internal audit. She nodded. We walked to the elevator, 2 women who understood that the trick wasn't being believed. It was being undeniable. Back in the waiting area, a text from Naomi vibrated my palm. Incident window repackaged with correlatives from his home network. Router shows midnight wipe attempt. We already cloned last week. It's him, Avery. My throat gathered around air. I typed, "Thank you. Hold that copy off-site. Legal vault." And then, because rituals matter, I added a single period on its own line and hit send, the way we always close the loop on a piece of work we were prepared to put our names on. Agent Morales opened a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" and gestured. "We're ready for you," she said to me, not to him. Gavin looked up from his chair like a man who's misheard the fire alarm. "For her?" His lawyer, a polished shadow with a perfect knot in his tie, blinked once and shifted a legal pad. Morales nodded. "We'll be with you in a moment, Mr. Mercer." Then to me, low enough no one else would feel it. "We'd like to take your statement first." Gavin's mouth opened on my name, but what came out was not my name. It was a trembling inventory of everything he didn't know about the room we were about to enter. I felt his gaze on my back as I followed Morales through the door into the light. The hallway beyond the authorized door smelled faintly of toner and lemon cleaner, that sterile government scent meant to keep emotion out of the air. But emotion clings. It rides along with every secret that's ever passed through these walls. I followed Agent Morales into a small conference room with one window, frosted on the lower half, open at the top where the morning light was starting to climb. "Please, have a seat," she said, gesturing toward the far chair. "This is just preliminary. I want to make sure our records are aligned before we continue with Mr. Mercer." I sat. The table was metal, cold against my forearms. She placed a manila folder in front of her and opened it with clinical precision, flipping through pages. On one of them, I caught my company logo, Lattice Sentinel, printed faintly in the corner of an internal report. It looked strange there, stripped of marketing polish, just data and dates. "You understand," she began, "we appreciate how thorough your documentation has been. The digital forensics alone, well, they're exceptional." I met her eyes. "You'd be surprised what people miss when they underestimate you." Morales smiled slightly. "That's been my experience too." She turned the folder toward me. "Before we finalize, I want to confirm something. You've been conducting this investigation for approximately 3 years?" Since the Morrison contract, I said quietly. Her pen hovered. That's the first known breach? Yes. Gavin, my husband, had just taken lead on a client account that seemed unusual. Files appeared in his personal directories that didn't belong to his department, encrypted but lazily. I decrypted them and found client specifications he wasn't authorized to access. And you reported it then? Not officially. Not yet. I folded my hands. At the time, I thought maybe it was a mistake, or that he was helping a T with cross-verification. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. That was my first mistake. Morales nodded, taking notes with crisp strokes. And what changed? The patterns repeated, I said. Different clients, different directories, same signature. I started keeping logs, creating mirror copies, tracking login hours. When his behavior aligned perfectly with each new breach, I stopped rationalizing. The agent regarded me over her glasses. That must have been difficult. It was necessary. A long moment of quiet passed. The hum of the overhead light filled it, steady as breathing. Morales leaned back slightly. I've read a lot of cybercrime reports, Mrs. Lang. Yours reads differently. There's empathy in it, almost a narrative. I write like I investigate, I said. Clarity matters more than revenge. She studied me again, the kind of look people give when they realize they've been underestimating someone, too. Would you mind if I asked how you learned to do all this? The forensics, the tracebacks, the packet correlation. These aren't beginner skills. I used to build systems before I started Lattice, I said. Mostly small networks for startups, but the breaches I saw then taught me that people, not firewalls, are the real vulnerabilities. People hide things badly, especially when they believe no one's watching. She smiled faintly. Invisible until it matters. Something like that. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, nodded once, and silenced it. They're with him now, she said. Your husband. His lawyer's trying to get ahead of the evidence, but there's too much. I didn't ask what he was saying. I already knew his language. Polished denials threaded with charm and panic. Gavin would try to build a story around coincidence and misunderstanding until it collapsed under its own arrogance. I'll need to testify? I asked. Eventually, yes, but for now, this interview is enough. When we left the room, Morales gestured for me to follow her to the observation window across the hall. The glass looked into a smaller room. A steel table, 2 chairs, fluorescent light sharp enough to make sweat glisten like gilt. Through the glass, Gavin sat hunched forward, his tie loosened, hair slightly damp at the temples. His lawyer, Vincent, murmured beside him, a sleek figure of quiet futility. Morales joined another agent at the monitor, and I stood back, watching my husband's reflection try to outtalk inevitability. He was explaining something with his hands, animated, persuasive. The same hands that used to circle my waist when he was celebrating a closed deal, the same that once slid across my keyboard just to prove he could. Now they trembled slightly as he gestured toward a printout of his own login logs. Morales' voice was soft. He's claiming his credentials were cloned. That's convenient, I murmured. She nodded. Except we have IP traces from your home network matching the timestamps. He used his personal router, same MAC address that pings your smart thermostat. The irony didn't escape me. Gavin had mocked me for installing a home automation system. You just like control, he'd said. He was right. He slammed his palms against the table. Even through glass, I could feel the vibration of it. Vincent placed a hand on his arm, cautioning restraint, but Gavin was unraveling fast, shoulders tightening, voice rising, veins visible in his neck. For a second, I thought he might look toward the window, sense me watching, but he didn't. He just buried his face in his hands and muttered something I couldn't hear. Morales turned to me. We'll conclude the interview soon. He's close to admitting the core breaches. How close? Seconds away from realizing there's no other story left to tell. I exhaled. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. Mrs. Lang, Morales said softly, when you first came to us, did you imagine it would end like this? I shook my head. I thought maybe he'd get scared before it got this far, stop himself. And you? Do you feel vindicated? Not yet, I said. Vindication requires satisfaction. I just feel finished. She gave a short nod. That's usually how justice starts. A door opened down the hall. Vincent stepped out first, adjusting his tie, followed by Gavin, smaller somehow, deflated. His eyes were red-rimmed. When he saw me, he froze. Avery, he whispered. His voice was hoarse. You're here? I was, I said evenly. They wanted my statement. He searched my face, then glanced toward Morales. You told them Everything? I told them the truth, I replied. All of it. His expression flickered between disbelief and something closer to betrayal. How could you do this? How could I not? He tried to speak again, but the words caught behind his teeth. Vincent guided him toward the elevators with a gentle hand. The sound of the door closing behind them was like a lid sealing on a long, fermenting jar. Morales turned back to me. We'll be in touch soon, she said, once the paperwork is filed. I nodded, barely hearing her. Through the frosted glass, I could still see Gavin's silhouette shrinking as he followed his lawyer down the hall. By the time I stepped outside, the sun had climbed higher, sharp enough to sting my eyes. The city traffic roared, oblivious to the private implosion that had just occurred 4 floors above. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of it. Not triumph, not relief, just a quiet, surgical absence where something used to live. My phone buzzed. A message from Naomi. Press heard about the audit. Someone leaked internal memos. You okay? I stared at the screen, then typed back. I'm fine. Just let them talk. Truth will have louder echoes. I slid my sunglasses on and walked toward the corner cafe, the same calm step I'd practiced for years. From now on, I thought, invisibility wasn't armor, it was strategy. And Gavin Mercer, once so sure of the story he was writing, was about to find out what happens when the quiet woman behind the curtain decides she's done being the footnote. By the time Gavin's confession made its way through the corporate grapevine, I was already in makeup under the sterile lights of Channel 7's downtown studio. The air smelled faintly of hairspray and nerves. Producers murmured to each other behind the glass, while a stylist dabbed powder along my jawline, trying to dim the sheen of exhaustion. The mirror in front of me showed a calm, composed woman in a navy blazer. Only I knew my hands were trembling under the table. Maya Chen, the host, leaned forward from her seat opposite mine, flashing a practiced smile. Avery Lang, CEO of Lattice Sentinel, she read from the teleprompter. The cybersecurity firm that recently uncovered one of the largest corporate espionage rings in Seattle's history. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me, I said, steady. It wasn't the first time I'd faced cameras. I'd done plenty of remote interviews back when my company was just a faceless logo in the tech circuit. But this was different. This wasn't about technology. It was about betrayal, trust, and the inconvenient truth that the husband of the woman on camera was now in federal custody. Maya adjusted her mic. Your firm discovered the breaches inside Mercer and Dane, correct? Including the involvement of multiple senior employees? Yes, I said. Our internal audit revealed unauthorized data transfers, financial misappropriations, and a series of forged vendor accounts. We turned over our findings to federal authorities. She paused for effect. And one of the individuals implicated was your husband. I'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed my answer a dozen ways. Still, when the words landed, the weight of them pressed into my chest. That's correct, I said evenly. But personal ties can't interfere with professional responsibility. When criminal activity is discovered, it must be reported, every time, regardless of who's involved. The studio went still. Even the hum of equipment seemed to hold its breath. Maya's voice softened. That must have been difficult. It was, I said truthfully. But what's harder is living with the knowledge and pretending you didn't see it. She nodded, visibly impressed. Lattice Sentinel has grown rapidly. Some call you the invisible architect, building empires from the shadows. Is that fair? I smiled faintly. People notice loud things first. I've just never needed to be loud. When the segment ended, the producer signaled cut, and the lights dimmed. Maya reached across the table and touched my hand. For what it's worth, she said. That was powerful. I thanked her, gathered my things, and left through the side exit. The parking lot's late afternoon light felt merciful, real, grounding. My phone vibrated before I even reached the car. Gavin, turn on Channel 7 now. I slid into the driver's seat and looked up at the billboard screen across the street. My own face filled the frame, composed, poised, articulate. Beneath it, the caption, Avery Lang, CEO of Lattice Sentinel, invisible until necessary. When I got home, the house felt smaller, the air heavier. Gavin was waiting in the living room, remote in hand, eyes wide with something between disbelief and fury. On the muted TV, the replay of the interview looped. He pointed at the screen. That's you. Yes. You're the CEO of Lattice Sentinel? His voice cracked halfway through my company's name, like he couldn't reconcile the syllables with reality. I am. He stared. You own the company my firm hired? Yes, I said simply. Technically, my company owns your company now, in a way. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. You've been building a business empire under my nose. You're worth millions. How could you keep that from me? I tilted my head. You never asked what I did during the day. That's not an answer. It's the only one that fits. He turned toward the TV again. You humiliated me on national television. No, I said quietly. You did that yourself. He laughed, sharp, incredulous. You think this makes you a hero? You destroyed your husband. I stopped protecting him. He froze, mouth open. The silence stretched until even the ticking of the wall clock felt accusatory. His voice dropped low, trembling. You turned me into the FBI. You, my own wife. You gave me no choice. He shook his head, stepping closer. You could have warned me. I did, I said, calm but firm. Many times. You just weren't listening. His face contorted. You didn't mean those comments at dinner, did you? The ones about ethics and compliance? Those weren't conversations. They were tests. They were chances, I corrected. You failed every one. He let out a bitter laugh. So this is revenge, because my coworkers mocked you. No, I said, standing now, facing him squarely. This isn't revenge. This is accountability. You thought invisibility meant weakness. You never understood it's a strategy. The words hung there, electric. He stared at me like I was speaking a language he'd never heard before. Then his expression softened suddenly, and for a moment, he was the man I'd once thought I loved. Charming, wounded, persuasive. Avery, please. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Say you were mistaken. You can fix this. I almost pitied him then. The reflexive arrogance of a man who still believed the world revolved around his story. I can't fix this, I said gently. But you could have, years ago, if you'd wanted to. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. I'll lose everything. Then maybe you'll finally understand what it feels like, I murmured. He didn't look up. What do you mean? To have everything taken from you while people laugh about it in the next aisle. Silence. Then a sound. Half laugh, half sob. You heard them that day. I hear everything, I said. That's how I survived you. He didn't move as I walked upstairs. In our bedroom, his half of the closet gaped open, suits and cufflinks lined up like soldiers waiting for orders that would never come. I stood there for a long moment, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound. Somewhere downstairs, the muted TV replayed my own face again, calm and unbothered. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. The next morning, I filed for divorce. 3 hours later, the headlines appeared. Gavin Mercer, Executive Vice President, charged in 15 Mellish corporate espionage case. I closed my laptop, sipped my coffee, and finally exhaled. The courthouse smelled like paper and nerves. That mix of fresh printouts and fear that only buildings of judgment can produce. I arrived early, slipping into the back row before anyone could notice. A reporter I recognized from the tech column was already there, flipping through her notes with caffeinated excitement. At the front, Gavin stood beside his lawyer, Vincent Walsh, in a rumpled gray suit that used to command rooms. Now it just looked tired. The fluorescent lights made him look older, like someone had drained all the color out of him overnight. His hands, once always in motion, rested limply on the defense table. The prosecutor read out the charges. 23 counts of wire fraud, 15 of corporate espionage, 8 of computer fraud, and 3 of money laundering. Each number landed like a bell toll, echoing around the chamber. Gavin didn't flinch, but I saw the slight twitch in his jaw, that tiny, involuntary muscle spasm of disbelief when a man realizes the story has been rewritten without his consent. How do you plead? The judge asked. Vincent leaned in. Not guilty, Your Honor. Of course, Gavin would never admit defeat publicly. Even now, in front of cameras and strangers, he still thought he could charm his way out of gravity. The judge denied bail. Too high a flight risk, too much financial access. Gavin's mother, a brittle woman in pearls, gasped quietly behind me. Vincent whispered something to her. We'll appeal, Mrs. Mercer. But the words slid off her like oil on glass. When the deputies moved to escort Gavin away, he finally looked up. Our eyes met across the room. His expression was a kaleidoscope. Anger, disbelief, maybe a flicker of regret. His lips moved around words I couldn't hear. But I didn't need to. I already knew their shape. You did this. I didn't look away. I just gave him the faintest nod. Acknowledgement, not apology. Then he was gone, swallowed by a side door and a future made of concrete and time. Outside, sunlight hit me like interrogation. Reporters waited on the steps, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Mrs. Lang, is it true you were the whistleblower? Did you discover your husband's crimes yourself? Will you be filing for divorce? I stopped at the top of the stairs. The crowd hushed. Somewhere a camera clicked like a heartbeat. My company was contracted to conduct a cybersecurity audit, I said clearly. We discovered systematic criminal activity and reported it to federal authorities as required by law. The fact that one of the perpetrators happened to be my husband is unfortunate, but it didn't change my professional responsibility. Do you have any regrets? Someone shouted. I considered that for a long second, only that I didn't stop pretending sooner. Flashbulbs erupted. Voices rose, but I was already walking down the marble steps toward a life that finally felt like mine. That night, the quiet of my apartment was deafening. Gavin's things were gone. His tailored suits, his cologne, even his ridiculous collection of whiskey glasses shaped like globes. I'd kept one, though, the one that shattered on our kitchen floor. I'd swept up the shards, washed one clean, and kept it in a small velvet box inside my desk drawer. A souvenir from the moment everything broke. Zara called just before midnight. I saw the news. They're calling you the silent architect. That's kind of badass. I smiled faintly. Better than the wife who knew. You did the right thing, Avery. You exposed the rot. Sometimes, I said, it feels less like justice and more like amputation. Maybe, she said softly, but you cut before the infection spread. Her voice cracked slightly when she added, We're all proud of you. When I hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the balcony. The city hummed below. Oblivious, alive. Somewhere out there, people were still whispering about me. The wife who turned her husband in. The CEO who built an empire in secret. The phone buzzed again. A new text. Unknown number. You destroyed my life. Hope you're happy. Gee. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I deleted it. No reply. No need. The next morning, headlines bloomed across every feed. Cybersecurity CEO exposes own husband's espionage ring. Avery Lang, the invisible woman who saw everything. Our firm's inbox overflowed. Half the messages were from companies asking for audits. The other half were from women, executives, engineers, interns, thanking me for proving that silence doesn't mean ignorance. I forwarded the business inquiries to Zara with one line. Start screening for credibility. No PR hires. Then I shut my laptop and looked around the quiet apartment. For the first time, it didn't feel like a waiting room. It felt like a headquarters. I pulled a new file from the desk drawer, stamped DOJ, consulting contract. Morales had emailed it last night. The Department of Justice wanted me to advise on digital financial crime investigations. When I'd first started Lattice Sentinel, I'd thought success would mean recognition. But now I understood something deeper. It meant clarity. Seeing things exactly as they are. No illusions left to protect. I signed the papers with a steady hand. Later that afternoon, Zara texted again. Champagne at the office? Team wants to toast. Tomorrow, I replied. Tonight, I need to remember what quiet feels like when it belongs to me. I stepped onto the balcony as the city lights flickered on one by one. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't empty. It was earned. Tomorrow, the papers would spin it however they wanted. The vengeful wife, the tech genius, the feminist icon. Let them. They could have their stories. I had mine, and it was just beginning. 6 months later, I could barely recognize my own name in the headlines. Forbes. Avery. Lang. The woman who outsmarted corporate America. The Times. The cybersecurity queen who turned her husband in. Wired. How one invisible woman changed the game. Every outlet had its angle. To some, I was a symbol of integrity. To others, I was a cautionary tale of what happens when you underestimate the quiet one. But beneath the noise, life had settled into a strange, steady rhythm, measured, deliberate, mine. Lattice Sentinel now occupied 4 floors of a high-rise downtown. Our reception lobby overlooked the Sound. Glass walls shimmered like water, sunlight spilling over the polished concrete floor. We'd gone from 50 employees to nearly 200. Zara handled most of the day-to-day operations now. I trusted her implicitly. She was the kind of partner who didn't need permission to move mountains. That morning, she was waiting for me by the window, phone in hand. You saw the DOJ email? I did. They want you full-time. I know. And you're still thinking about it? I'm thinking about balance, I said. and the fact that I built this so I wouldn't have to work for anyone else again. She smiled. That's the Avery I know. We walked through the open office. Conversations hushed briefly as we passed. I still wasn't used to that. The way people straightened, voices lowered, eyes followed. Power has its own gravity. At the end of the hallway, Naomi waved me into the analytics lab. We've got something, she said, her excitement barely contained. On the screen, rows of data pulsed in real time. Transactions, logins, network anomalies. It's the Carter Group, she explained. They hired us after that phishing breach last month. We found a hidden shell company siphoning payments offshore. Could be another multi-million-dollar fraud. I watched the pattern unfold, the telltale symmetry of deceit. The same kind of arrogance Gavin once had, thinking no one would ever look close enough. Forward everything to DOJ cybercrime, I said. Let them handle the prosecution. We'll stay on the technical side. Naomi nodded. Got it. As she left, I lingered for a moment, watching the data streams flicker like constellations. There was a strange poetry to it, chaos reduced to patterns, lies mapped into light. And that evening, the office celebrated another milestone, our European expansion. London, Berlin, Amsterdam. 3 cities, 3 new teams. Zara clinked her glass against mine. To invisibility, she said. I laughed. To being seen when it counts. Same thing, she grinned. The team cheered, cameras flashed, and for once I allowed myself to enjoy the attention, the noise, the validation. Later, when everyone else had gone home, I stayed behind, sitting at my desk with the city's skyline glowing through the glass. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. You destroyed my life. I hope you're proud of yourself. I stared at the message for a long time. No name, but I didn't need one. Gavin had found a way to get a phone, or convince someone to send it for him. The same old entitlement, repackaged as grievance. I typed out a reply, then deleted it. Twice. Finally, I set the phone face down on the desk and whispered to the empty room, "You destroyed yourself." The sound of my voice startled me. I hadn't said his name out loud in months. I didn't need to. A week later, Agent Morales called. "Just wanted to give you an update," she said. "Your ex-husband's trial is over. He took a plea deal. 15 years, no parole." I exhaled slowly. "He'll still be young enough to start over when he gets out." "Maybe," Morales said. "Though people like him rarely start over. They just find new angles." "What about the others?" "Brittany got 5, Melissa got 3, the director 7. Justice neatly itemized." Morales hesitated before hanging up. "You should know, the DOJ task force is serious about the consulting offer. They want you to help train agents. Real cases, real field work." I glanced at the city lights beyond my window. "Tell them I'll think about it." The following morning, I woke to a package at my door. No return address. Inside, a letter written in Gavin's unmistakable handwriting, precise, almost elegant. "Avery, I've had time to think about what happened. I realize now I underestimated you. I told myself I was smarter, but you were always 3 steps ahead. I don't hate you anymore. Maybe this is justice. Maybe it's mercy. Either way, you won. G." I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. No anger, no satisfaction, just quiet. Then I slid it into a drawer with the broken glass shard. The first and last pieces of a story that was finally complete. 2 months later, I stood on stage at the Tech Women Conference in San Francisco, facing a crowd of 5,000. The theme was visibility. "People assume power looks a certain way," I began. "Loud, aggressive, obvious. But sometimes power is the one standing quietly in the corner, watching patterns form. Sometimes power is patience." The audience was silent, phones lifted to record. "Being underestimated isn't an insult," I continued. "It's an opportunity. The world only sees what it wants to. Use that." When the applause came, it rolled like thunder. Backstage, Zara handed me a water bottle and said, "You killed it." I smiled. "No," I said softly. "I survived it." As I stepped outside, sunlight cut through the fog and scattered across the bay. Sharp, brilliant, impossible to ignore. Invisibility had served its purpose. Now it was time to be seen. The years folded in quietly after the trial, like a long exhale that had been waiting to happen. Lattice Sentinel grew beyond anything I'd ever imagined. We'd opened offices in London, Singapore, and Sydney. I spent most of my time in motion. Airports, conferences, boardrooms, where men still underestimated me until I opened my laptop. The world loved the story of the woman who caught her husband. It made for a good headline, poetic, clean, easy to digest. But the real story was slower, stranger. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about what comes after you win a war you didn't ask to fight. One afternoon in late autumn, I found myself in Washington, D.C., sitting across from Agent Morales again. Her hair was shorter now, her tone the same mixture of warmth and authority. "The Department of Justice loved your workshop," she said. "They're asking if you'd consider joining as a special consultant, officially this time." I smiled. "You don't give up, do you?" "Neither do you." She leaned forward. "This isn't just a desk job. You'd be shaping national protocol for digital forensics, helping us rewrite how we investigate corporate crimes." I paused. "And you're sure they're ready for a civilian with my history?" "They're not hiring your past," she said. "They're hiring your precision." Her phrasing stayed with me. Precision. The word felt cleaner than revenge, sharper than redemption. "I'll think about it," I told her, "but I still have a company to run." She nodded, sliding an envelope across the table. "Before you decide, there's something you should see." Inside were 4 handwritten letters, different names, different prisons. Gavin, Brittany, Melissa, and Director Thompson. Each one addressed to me. I read the first line of Gavin's and stopped. "Avery, I'm learning the art of being invisible." The irony was almost elegant. Brittany's letter was full of apologies that sounded like press releases. Melissa's tried humor, as if sarcasm could scrub away a felony. Thompson's was just a single page. Numbers, written over and over again, each corresponding to transaction IDs I'd uncovered years ago. Some people never stop coding their guilt. I closed the envelope and handed it back. "I'm not their confessor," I said. Morales nodded. "Didn't think you were. I just needed to know." 3 months later, I returned to Seattle for a rare, quiet week. The office hummed with routine. The good kind. The kind that means a company can stand without its founder. Zara met me in the hallway, tablet in hand. "Welcome home, boss. Europe's breaking records, by the way. Berlin just landed 3 new contracts." "Good," I said. "Let's make sure they have the right firewalls this time. I don't want any ghosts in our systems." She grinned, still paranoid. "Still alive," I corrected. We walked past a glass meeting room where a new hire was giving a presentation. She was young, mid-20s, nervous, but sharp. Her name was Lila, and she joined us right after finishing her cybersecurity master's degree. Through the glass, I caught a fragment of what she was saying. "And people always think I'm too quiet to lead, but that's my advantage." Zara nudged me. "Sound familiar?" I smiled. "I like her already." That night, after everyone left, I stayed behind in the empty office. The city was quiet outside, rain tracing soft lines down the windows. I poured myself tea and opened my laptop to a message from MIT. Subject: honorary degree. Request for keynote participation. I stared at it for a long time, remembering the girl I'd been when I dropped out. Broke, stubborn, determined to prove she didn't need permission to build something extraordinary. I typed back, "Accepted, and yes, I'll speak." The cursor blinked like applause. The next day, as I packed for the flight east, I received another letter. No stamp this time, just internal mail, forwarded through DOJ channels. It was from Gavin again, written in neat block print on government-issued stationery. "Avery. They offered me a teaching position in the prison computer lab. It's ironic, I know, but maybe it's something. Maybe I can still be useful. I don't expect forgiveness. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that power without conscience collapses eventually. I hope you've found peace. G." I folded the page and placed it in the drawer beside the first letter, the one where he'd told me I'd won. Maybe he meant it this time, maybe not. Either way, I didn't feel anything except distance, the kind that doesn't ache anymore. The following week, I stood on stage at MIT, the same campus I'd walked away from at 22. The auditorium was full, students, professors, journalists. "My name is Avery Lang," I began. "I was once told I'd regret dropping out of this school. Maybe they were half right. I did regret it, until I realized that what I was building couldn't fit inside someone else's syllabus." Laughter rippled softly. "I've spent my life studying systems, how they're built, how they break, and how people hide inside them. The most dangerous vulnerabilities aren't digital. They're human. We trust too easily. We dismiss too quickly. We underestimate too often." I paused, scanning the faces in front of me. Invisibility isn't a curse. It's a choice. The trick is knowing when to step out of it. When the applause came, it felt like closure, not loud, but deep. Afterward, an older professor approached me backstage. "Ms. Lang," he said, smiling, "you could have had this degree years ago." I shook his hand. I think I earned it in a different classroom. That night, back in my hotel room, I looked out over Cambridge, the same skyline I'd left behind to build something of my own. Somewhere out there, a young woman was coding late into the night, doubting herself. I hoped she'd hear my story someday and know that invisibility could be power, not punishment. As I turned off the light, my phone buzzed again. Zara. MIT talk went viral. DOJ wants to finalize your appointment. Europe expansion confirmed. Proud of you. I smiled, typed back a single line. We're just getting started. And for the first time in years, I believed it completely. 2 years later, I stood in Geneva beneath the blue and white flag of the United Nations, delivering a presentation on global digital ethics. It was strange looking out at the room, rows of suited diplomats, translators whispering in glass booths, screens flickering with my slides about corporate transparency and data integrity. Once I had sat behind men like these, silent, nodding when spoken to. Now they were taking notes. Cybersecurity, I said, isn't just about protecting systems. It's about protecting trust. And the people who betray that trust rarely start with crime. They start with convenience. The words landed with the kind of quiet weight that fills a room more than applause ever could. When I stepped off stage, a woman from the German delegation caught my arm. "Dr. Lang," she said, "still strange to hear, even with the honorary title. We have a case you might be interested in. A pharmaceutical firm in Munich suspects intellectual theft. They want to hire Lattice Sentinel to investigate." "Send me the details," I said. "We'll take it." By the end of that week, I had contracts from 6 different governments sitting in my inbox. Our company had become the global standard for digital forensics. We trained investigators in 30 countries. And still, every now and then, someone would ask how it all began. Usually, I'd give the short version. I caught a thief. But sometimes, when the room was small and the lights were low, I'd tell the longer truth about how the thief was my husband, how invisibility had saved me before it ever defined me. In private, I never used his name anymore. It had become just a data point, a case study filed in the archives. One morning, while in London for a government summit, a brown envelope appeared on my hotel breakfast tray. No return address, just my name, typed cleanly. Inside was a folded clipping from a prison newsletter called Second Chances. The article headline, "Former Executive Helps Inmates Learn Coding Behind Bars." There was a photo, grainy, low contrast. Gavin, older now, hair cut short, smiling awkwardly beside a group of inmates around a donated computer cart. The caption read, "Teaching Programming to Reduce Recidivism." For a long moment, I stared at it. Then, carefully, I refolded the page and slipped it into my notebook. He had found a way to be useful again. Maybe, in the end, we both had. Months later, Time ran a cover story. "The Invisible Woman: How Avery Lang Built a Cybersecurity Empire While the World Doubted Her." I didn't love the title, but the journalist had written with care. The final paragraph read, "Lang's rise isn't just a story of intelligence, it's a story of patience. In a world obsessed with being seen, she proved that power sometimes begins in silence." I kept a copy of that issue on my bookshelf at home, next to a first edition copy of Women Who Run with the Wolves. One evening in New York, after a long day of meetings, I had dinner at a quiet restaurant in Soho. The table beside mine was occupied by 2 women in pencil skirts, gossiping over cocktails. "She's so bland," one said. "Sits through every meeting without saying a word." The other laughed. "Probably doesn't even know what half the data means." I caught their reflection in the mirror. Their faces reminded me of Kendall and Melissa, all confidence, no curiosity. They kept talking, oblivious. I smiled faintly, stirring my espresso. Somewhere in another office, their quiet colleague was probably watching, learning, building something no one would see coming. People never learn. When I left the restaurant, the night air off the Hudson carried the faint hum of traffic and the smell of rain. I walked through the crowd, tourists, locals, voices in dozens of languages. Every sound blended into one restless rhythm. My phone buzzed, a message from Zara. Interpol confirmed. "We're cleared to launch the Joint Global Initiative next month." "Congratulations, boss." I texted back. "The Invisible Woman goes global." She replied with a single emoji, a ghost. I laughed out loud, earning a curious glance from a passerby. Back at my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the city pulse below. My reflection merged with the skyline, transparent, luminous, alive. The women at that CVS years ago had thought they knew who I was, the mousy wife with nothing to offer. They couldn't have imagined the world I would build from that silence. The empire that grew out of invisibility, the peace that followed exposure, the freedom that comes when you no longer need to be seen to know your worth. I raised my glass to the city, to the noise, to every woman who has ever been underestimated. Here's to being invisible, I whispered, until it's time not to be. Then I smiled at my reflection, not the quiet wife, not the vengeful whistleblower, but the woman who had outgrown both. If this story moved you, I said softly, as though speaking to someone beyond the glass, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story too.